So good afternoon, everybody. For the roll, I can see that we have David, Peter, Joel, Stephen, Vilda, and Bill. Do we have other members present?
Hadley Horrigan in Buffalo is here.
Great. Great to hear from you, Hadley. Okay. Can I get a motion, please, to vote on whether to approve the minutes of the September 17th meeting? These would be the revised minutes.
Steve Waters, I'll move it.
I'll second that. Grimm.
Great, terrific. Can we have a vote, please? All in favor of the approval of those minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
If you would just pop in and say your name so that Candace can record who's voting.
Steve Waters in favor.
Vilda Mayuga in favor.
Peter Grimm, aye.
Dave Schultz, aye.
Bill Brusso in favor.
Is that 6? Candace, is that 6? Kristen, is that 6? Are you muted?
Sorry, I'm muted. So we have David, Joel, Stephen, Peter, Bill, Vilda. That's 6.
Yep. How about can I get a motion to vote on the approval of the minutes of the October 21 meeting?
So moved. Peter Grimm.
Thank you. A second?
Second, Stephen Waters.
Thank you. Can I have a vote, please?
Stephen Waters, aye.
Bill Brusso in favor.
Vilda Mayuga in favor.
Dave Schultz, aye.
We have David, Peter, Vilda, Bill, Stephen. Do we have Joel? I didn't know if I heard Joel.
Yep, aye.
Great. Okay. So those then are approved. And now we can get to the meat of the meeting. Our draft report for 2020. I think I've spoken to Kristen. I know this is my first year writing a report with you guys, but in the past, what has worked is that we've sort of gone through the draft and talked about any comments that may or may not need to be made, and then try to reach consensus on each of those. So unless there's an objection to doing it that way, we should probably get started doing it that way. Does anyone want to object to doing that? Okay. We did receive earlier today some comments. Thank you very much, Bill. And we can reach there was one main substantive comment, and I propose that we reach your substantive comment when we get there in the draft, and we can all discuss the various views on that comment. So we can start with the section which we've called the 2020 Legislative Amendments to FOIL. That's on page 3, beginning with letter A.
Shoshona.
Yes, go ahead.
If you have no objection, could you take the first paragraph and turn it into a bullet point rather than a prose paragraph?
The introduction?
Yeah, in other words, rather than have it prose, it'd be easier for people to see if it were just bullet points listed.
Sure. Oh, this report includes and then a series of bullet points?
Right.
Yep, no problem. Sorry, I skipped that paragraph. So now we can move on to letter A, where we talk about amendments to FOIL enacted with the repeal of Section 50A of the Civil Rights Law. I haven't received any written comments on this that are substantive, so if anyone has any, let's talk about them now.
This may not be substantive, but I thought that Bill's suggestions for grammar, I would generally accept all the way through without objection unless somebody raises something special. So I won't mention them during the conversation of the sections.
Absolutely. I thank you for raising that. I agree that we should fix the typographical errors that appeared in the draft. So nobody has any substantive comment on discussion A? Okay. How about discussion B, where we talk about amendments to FOIL dealing with lawsuits by commercial entities to block disclosure? We discussed this in last year's report.
Shoshana, this is Dave. I'm just having some technical issues opening that, so I may circle back to you, but sorry, I'll try to catch up with you.
Do you want me to send it to you again? Is that in a different form? Or?
No, that's okay. I'm trying to find the one that was circulated this morning.
Oh, this morning, right. It was a red line. Yep. Okay, so now we're in number B. It was a revision for clarity and updates of a previous section that we'd already had put forward in the prior year's report, I think. We discussed a bit of it, and then it got passed after the finalizing of the report. Kristen, am I wrong about that?
You are not wrong. That is correct.
Okay, great. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to temporary changes to the open meetings law in 2020. This is a section that we prepared on the governor's executive order 202.1, suspending certain aspects of the open meetings law and the common themes that have arisen since then. We just thought it would be helpful to give a summary of that. Okay. Does anyone have any comments on the 2020 court decisions section, other than the typographical corrections? Okay.
Shoshana, sorry, this is Dave again. Can you, I have it open now. I'm just trying to catch up with you. The section on the open meetings law, hold on, where does that start?
Oh, I'm sorry. That begins on page 8 in the middle.
Yeah. So one thing I thought that this goes to formatting, that I thought that we might think about reformatting some of this to clarify, particularly when we get towards the back, like what are our priorities and what aren't. And this section about temporary changes, it sort of discusses what's there, but I wonder if there's a way of running a theme through this of kind of what we learned from COVID. It talks about the changes that went into place in 2020, but then also draws some conclusions or suggestions for further investigation of things that worked well and things that might be made permanent to make the government function more efficiently.
Oh,
do you follow my thinking? In other words, a lot of rules were suspended because of COVID, and some allowed electronic communications and other ways of meeting. And it may be that some of those should be made permanent. And I just think we might reflect on like what have we learned in the last 8 months that might be useful to contemplate on a more permanent basis.
So I would think that the only sort of aspect of this that we would reflect on in that way would be the changes to the open meetings law, since there were no changes made to any other open government law that we sort of have responsibility for. I know that anecdotally, I've heard a significant number of folks, even folks on this committee, say that it's much easier to attend a meeting if you don't have to drive 6 hours each direction to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Or 3 hours each direction. So I suppose that convenience is certainly enhanced
Mm-hmm.
of members of public bodies, but I don't know what conclusions that this committee might be prepared to draw on servicing that goal. But
Well, and then one would be, whether the open meetings law should be changed in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed going forward. And the other is later on we have a section on cameras in the courts and taking up that cudgel again. I also think it would be appropriate for us to comment on access to the courts and how COVID has affected them. Because I think that there would be a lot to say, at least in terms of encouraging the legislature to look, and the courts to look at ways of making themselves more user-friendly, both for litigants and for the public to follow what's going on. It's along the same lines of some of these things about using technology.
I'd have to give serious thought to the question whether it's within our remit to talk about access in that way in light of COVID, but I'm happy to entertain any suggestion that you may have for preparation of such an opinion.
Yeah, sure. And this is probably the time to talk about it. And maybe what we need to do is like get some of this down on paper for the next time. But these are linked in my mind. It's like there's been a tremendous expansion of the use of technology to do business. And some of those are in ways that would be useful to make more permanent, and where the law restricts agencies or courts from doing that now, we ought to think about changing that. And I do think it's within our mandate to make suggestions to the legislature about how to improve transparency. We've always viewed that. And even the whole discussion of cameras in the courts, if that's not our business, that's not our business. But I think it is. I think that's what we're here for. And I think that's why we report once a year to the legislature and the governor. It's like things you guys should be considering to make government work better. I'd be happy to work with you offline to come up with some. I mean, I think there's a number of things we can say about the courts, and not that we'd necessarily be advocating specific changes, but just elevating that as an issue for consideration. Telephone conferences by courts saves a whole lot of time for everybody. And we go on and on.
I suspect that the issue of COVID is going to be something we're going to be dealing with next year anyway.
I certainly agree with that assessment there, Steve. I'm still struggling a little bit, David, to understand. Are you suggesting that we do this in this year's report, or start working on it for next year's?
No, I'm suggesting that in this year's report, you already have the section on how the open meetings laws were suspended, things that were done on an emergency basis. And it seems to me appropriate to take that the next step and say, among these things that were done, should we be considering some of them on a permanent basis? And maybe we don't have a conclusion about that, but maybe we could say, these things seem to be working, they deserve looking at. That kind of an approach. And packaging this whole thing as, lessons from COVID about government transparency and efficient use of technology. Because I don't think in a lot of ways we shouldn't be going back. When COVID ends, we shouldn't be going back to some of the old practices that are just time consuming, burdensome, slow things down.
Well, I'm curious to know whether there's, support for this thought, from a majority of committee members. I'm struggling still to try to fit it into the way we would normally go about things. We don't have any experience. The committee staff don't have any. Nobody's calling us to talk about these things. We don't have anything to offer from that perspective. But this would be information that would come from others, I would suspect. So, David, you included. I just wonder if other committee members are interested in pursuing this, and if we have a majority of members who are interested in pursuing it, we can do that.
This is Stephen, and I certainly don't see any problem with being forward-looking, because forward-looking is almost fast upon us.
I agree with being forward-looking as well. I'm just not sure that I have anything personally to add from my experience that would help frame this up. I think the committee is not being asked these questions, and we're not being asked to opine on these things. So I would need the committee members to help us.
I think that David has suggested that he would offer something so that you don't have to come out of fresh cloth and figure it out for yourself. And simply because it's offered doesn't mean it has to be accepted.
David, you're muted. So just remember I have to mute people when they're not talking because we get feedback. So just remember to unmute yourself.
I thought I was. Shoshana, I guess just to underscore, I don't think this is the sort of thing where we have to have specific proposals necessarily, but where we can comment upon, we know that these changes were made, and we can comment upon this, whether some of these seem like they were valuable or that they could potentially be valuable and they warrant consideration. It's in that nature. It's not necessarily we found that these 10 things are working, or
Right. I honestly don't have the experience to know whether the new courtroom rules are working. I just don't have that data.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I, for one, would dearly like to be able to attend these meetings without my 2 or 3 hour penalty each direction.
I was referring to you, I think. Okay, so we have one committee member saying that we should work on this. David, if you want to send something over, we can circulate it and have another meeting to vote on the content.
Yeah, I think it's worth pursuing, but it would be nice if we could get some objective determination that made out there that, this is a good thing and it's working.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm struggling with. It's hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
That these things are so new that it can be difficult to know comment upon the varying degrees of success or failure without ignoring evidence that is just you're not aware of, that other people may be experiencing. There's been no study, as far as I know, that would make a conclusion one way or another. That's not to say that hasn't happened, and I'm happy to hear about them if they exist and we can talk about them. So
Yeah, I'll be happy to look at what David might have to suggest. If it's probably easier to look at something actually already laid out as something, and then maybe that will bring a clearer picture. But I'm gathering that the idea will be not so much perhaps on what's worked or what hasn't if we don't have the data, but more posing it as a question. I think is what I'm thinking that David, it's probably saying it's like, okay, this we had to do this because of a pandemic, but even if there's no pandemic, could this be the new way of doing certain things? And I don't know that we would necessarily be the ones to say it has to be. And I think it's maybe I don't know if I misunderstood you, David, maybe, but I think if what you're saying is that it's worth taking a look and, hey, someone else that's not the committee that has this role of changing, right, the legislature, I should say, changing laws or anything, want to look at it, then I guess that seems like an okay statement, but probably, yeah. So I'm looking forward to whatever David has to suggest.
Okay, well, when we have something to circulate, we will circulate it. So we had got up to, I believe, proactive disclosure, and this is where Bill had a comment. So I will let Bill make his comment.
Sorry, I'm mute. It just seems that we shouldn't be commenting on something that has not been introduced yet because we don't really know if it ever will be. I mean, if we want to adopt the ideas that are present and pitch them as our own proposal, that's something we have done in the past. But I don't think we should be talking about something that might never happen.
So that did occur to me too. Obviously, we had at the last meeting sort of, I guess, collectively agreed that we would see what it looked like. So one thing we did before we got on today was just to check and confirm that Assembly member Paulin hadn't yet introduced those bills that she was talking about. And in fact, she has not. Those additions and amendments to her bills have not yet happened. So, I think we should probably just figure out if the rest of the committee, shares that comment. That's well taken.
It's Franklin. I'm sorry I'm late joining you. I've been in the dentist chair until 10 minutes ago. So I have some overall comments that I don't know if they've already been covered, but I'll address the point that just got raised. I'm not at all troubled by making a recommendation where legislation hasn't yet been introduced. That doesn't bother me at all. If it's a good idea, maybe it will inspire someone to submit legislation. That's my view.
But I think Will makes an important distinction in how it's presented in terms of a point of view. If Bill says let's do it either from the position of the bill or let's do it from our own position, and I think that's a valid distinction, and I'm glad that Bill brought it up.
So moving forward on the idea that it's a valid distinction, is the committee in favor of reordering that or rearranging that or refocusing that content to make it a recommendation, bearing in mind that at least some aspects of what we had understood might be proposed might have maybe some potentially unintended consequences that we haven't really talked through as a committee.
Like what, Shoshana?
Well, I was thinking of one of the reasons why I said we'd probably want to read it, obviously, before we made a recommendation, would be if there would be any potential unintended consequences that were financial associated with some of the recommendations, or some that might introduce delay because it would be differing questions and strongly held views about the status of something. So I guess principally, I guess that comment addressed, as I'm flipping back, well, one of them, I guess, would be that there'd probably be a lot of debate about the financial disclosure forms of locals and who would be covered by that. And then I guess the other thing was the retention period on the the possibility of the 5 years of the retaining of the video. And I can't see, I remember writing that something might be create a delay, but now I can't find where I wrote it.
I think the question, the time period is a valid one, but there's a difference between 4 months and 5 years, and certainly 1 year is reasonable.
Potentially, it's hard for me to know. Certainly, we know what the archives, what the state archives, and what the cultural arts and cultural affairs law says.
Shoshana, this is Krista. I just wanted to weigh in. I know we had also talked about the concern about posting meeting minutes, because oftentimes they need to be prepared within a certain amount of time, but they're not necessarily approved by the governing body, by the public body, within that 2-week period. So the open meetings law requires that they be prepared and be made available upon request within 2 weeks. But many public bodies have concerns about posting them before they've been approved. So that's something to consider when deciding whether that's a recommendation that be approved, that they be posted online within 2 weeks.
That's one of the things that I liked about the idea of a draft versus approved. The distinction is important.
Okay, so that the delay issue wasn't with respect to Assembly Member Pollin's bills, so it was before, so that's not relevant here. But so is there a consensus that we should recraft this to make them our recommendations?
I think that there's an opportunity to recraft, even if it's not approved. It can be recrafted and presented, and then we can decide, no, there's more to be discussed here. Let's not include it in this report.
All right. That brings us to the reasonable use of cameras in courtrooms, which is on page 13 in the middle. Okay. Government-created entities should be subject to FOIL, which is page 13 on the bottom. All right. Bring JCOPE within the coverage of FOIL and the open meetings law, which is on page 14 in the middle. All right, the clarifying amendments section on page 15 at the top. All right, clarify Civil Rights Law 50B to protect privacy of victims of sex offenses, not that of defendants. Page 15 toward the bottom. Okay, page 16 toward the bottom, disclose or withhold E911 records pursuant to FOIL. All right, and on page 17 in the middle, amend FOIL to create a presumption of access to records of the state legislature. Okay. The next section is the services rendered by the committee.
I just have a one question, Shoshana, on that whole section. I wonder if the proposals are in order of priority, or do we care? I mean, some of them to me seem more important than others, and maybe it doesn't matter where they are in the flow, but I just wonder if there was any sense that we should
In the
highlight
section,
the proposals to the legislature.
in the section on the proposals.
Yeah.
Honestly, they were just, I think, in that same order before, so that's, I think, how the order got chosen today.
Yeah.
The only thing that, the proactive disclosure section, it may have been first before, but it's, as drafted, it was significantly longer and more involved than it had been in prior years. And so I first seemed okay for that, but from my perspective, it hadn't been ranked. But if the committee wants to rank them or put them in an order of priority, that's fine. It's great.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's possible to prioritize them though.
Yeah, it may not be. And people up there in Albany may have a better sense of which of these are realistic or not. But, some of them, it seems to me, would have more of an impact, and we should be pounding the table a little harder about their importance. But they also may be the hardest to sell.
Right.
This is Kristen. I just wanted to mention, I'm pretty sure that they're, other than the proactive disclosure, I think they're in the order that we agreed to last year.
Yeah, we did go through a whole prioritizing thing last year.
So, Franklin, you had mentioned when you first came and joined us that you had some other comments that may not have made it into the record. So if you want to say those, that'd be great.
This is just a global suggestion that you all may have already discussed. There should be an executive summary up at the beginning. That's a half page to a page long, I think, where we've only got a two sentence or one sentence introduction. I think it should be much lengthier. Comment on 50A and comment about the other issues. That there obviously will be a table of contents in the front, but I think we ought to have something that's more of the nature of an executive summary up front. And I thought there were a few places, and I'm happy to give them to you, where I thought our responses could be a little more forceful instead of, as the journalists say, burying the lead. And I'm happy to submit some language on that.
Okay.
And I guess I would be curious whether there are issues that we've left out of this report that we think should be left in, and I'd be interested in what our third parties attending this meeting think about that as well. I would invite comment.
We leave anything out? I thought the same as last year.
No, they're only additions from last year, Vilda.
Right.
Well, with one exception, and that would be we are no longer in a position to advocate for the repeal or amendment of Section 50A of the Civil Rights Law, since that has occurred.
Yeah.
And I think it's appropriate for us to comment things like that occurring.
I think okay, well, there is a reference to our prior position on that in the document.
But I think it should be covered in an executive summary. We argued it for 7 years, and we can now take it, at least aspects of it, off our plate. I think it should be commented on up front.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond a comment to a compliment. In
Yeah.
other words, the people who read the summary, it's really nice to have us be able to say we point with pride at this.
We've done that in the past. Usually what we've done in our executive summary like thing is to say, we had these successes in the last year. We had these failures. We had, these things stalled or whatever, just to set up front. And there's no reason, whether it's with pride or otherwise, not to comment on what is clearly a success for the committee's point of view in the last year.
And it turns out we're not complimenting ourselves, but we're complimenting all the people who read the report who made it happen.
Yes.
Well, I will write an executive summary as you have requested. One thing that had been requested before, Franklin, before you were able to join us, was that we reframe that introduction and at least break it up into bullets. So as we do that, we can fill in some additional content under those to make it read more like a summary instead of a statement of what's to come that's more terse. We'll try to summarize.
And I think it's also worth saying that I think you did a very good job pulling this all together into a cohesive thing that we really didn't have to comment very much about in order to tweak.
Yeah, this is Joel. If I real quick, I don't want to stop any progress or anything, but I just wanted to make sure that one of my primary concerns on commenting on 50A and personal feelings is that, I think the discussion was propelled forward in large part because of the death of an individual, thousands of miles away. I want to make sure anything we say is very respectful to that. And I just think that we should keep that in mind. I don't want to make it seem as if, there was some sort of greater weight given to anything that anybody else did in respect to everything that's occurred. So that's my comment.
I agree with you, Joel, and I don't think we have to take credit because there were a lot of mothers and fathers and coincidences. But it's fair to report that something that we have been advocating for 7 years actually happened in the last year.
And maybe comment that it's sad that it took a national tragedy to get people to focus on this need.
Yes.
David, I wouldn't play that particular card.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But we can think it, Dave.
So my takeaway will be, just in case I don't want to miss anything, that is our takeaway for a next version of this, will be to expand the introduction to make it more of an executive summary style section, to reframe the proactive disclosure section that deals with the not yet introduced bills to make them recommendations of the committee, and wait to hear from Dave on whether and to what extent we can add to the temporary changes to law section that goes beyond the OML piece that we've already got, to see if there's something else that we would like to say there. And when those three things happen, I can circulate a new draft and we can set a meeting in short order. And Franklin's going to send me some material that she would like to see in there, and we can circulate that around as well with this draft as soon as possible, and then set a new meeting to talk about this again. Does that sound like a good summary of what I need to do and what we all need to do? Okay. Barring anything else that anyone wants to say on the draft that we have in front of us now, we could move on to see if there's any other or new business.
I want to comment on the executive summary. I think it's really important to include it in our report. I think it should be brief. I don't think it should be in any way emotional or patting ourselves on the back. But I think when we send the document, I think there should be something in it that defines us and defines the work that's done.
I can take a crack at that. Does any member have another item they wish to raise?
I think we should invite commentary from our non-board attendees, whether we do that now or whether we do that before we conclude. I think some of the things that are in here were generated in that way, and we ought to see if there's additional commentary. I realize they didn't instead of having our draft, but
I guess they did. It was posted.
Oh, was it posted? Good, good.
This is gonna go back to my report last time. I don't think this is the way to ask for commentary. I think the report is a report of the committee, and it's for the committee members to opine and look into a committee report. I certainly think that if there are comments from non-committee members, those should most definitely be forwarded to the committee for consideration. But I don't think it's supposed to be done in this committee meeting.
I disagree, but I'm happy to take their comments in writing.
Frankly, just for reference, we have had great success at receiving comments in writing as well. So, and in fact, those ones that we did take up this year in the report were submitted both orally and in writing. So yeah, we did receive them, so that's good. But again, anyone who has had access to the meeting materials for this meeting will have had the hard copy of the document and can comment to us, and either, they'll send us an email maybe. I know that I see a couple of our friends who've done that on this call right now, so perhaps they'll send us notes if they feel like we missed the mark, and we can evaluate that when we next meet to hopefully agree on a document. Does anyone have any opposition to trying to get this meeting scheduled for like within the next week or two? Do you think that will be, I know that it's possible for us, for the staff, to make these requested, suggested, discussed changes and recirculate. I think what it will a little bit depend on David and you, Franklin, for submission of that additional material that you want the rest of the committee to consider before we can recirculate and meet again. So really that's to you, David and Franklin, to let us know, how quickly you can get that stuff to me, and so that we can incorporate it.
Couple of days for me.
Okay, do we want to say that David, I don't want to rush you by next Friday?
Yeah, no, I certainly can get you whatever I have to offer by the beginning of next week.
Okay. So with that in mind, I will ask Candace to ask us all for our availability during the week of the 16th of November. That's before Thanksgiving. Is that, and object if you want, but so that I know that there's objections, but that would be my preferred way of trying to get this discussed with you guys again before Thanksgiving.
That would be timely.
I agree.
All right. I will put together with Candace some proposed dates in that week. They'll be as flexible as we can make them. And hopefully we can get a quorum together at some point in that week. And does anyone else have anything else they wish to raise or discuss?
Shoshana, maybe you could just say a few words in this public meeting about where we stand on filling vacancies.
Sure, I have continued to be in touch with the entity with the vacancies, and I am told that they are being actively pursued. I don't have any insight other than to say that that is what I've been told, and I believe them. I think it's a difficult time in history. I think it's a difficult time of year. I think it's a difficult time in general, but I am hopeful that they're going to get these vacancies filled. I was hopeful that they were going to do it quickly, and I continue to be hopeful that they are going to do it reasonably quickly. So I'm hopeful, but I don't know the answer. I just know what I'm told. But I have followed it up. It is something that's on my mind because it's on your minds as well.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting if we're all through?
Stephen, I'll move it.
Bill will second.
Can we have a vote, please? Just shout it out if you approve.
Aye.
How about this? Anyone not in favor? Great. I think the motion is carried. And so with that, we will adjourn and we'll be back within the next couple of weeks to further discuss this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.